And it only changed its name to the Lodi Garden after independence in 1950. Well, the areas around it, the India International Center, if you can read the small writing, it says the UN offices, UNICEF, the World Wildlife Fund, the India Habitat, everybody was moved out, all these buildings were constructed, and the architect was an American architect resident in India, Joseph Stein. And they brought in an American landscape architect, Garrett Ekbo, and they redid Lady Willingdon's garden. They re-landscaped it with jogging paths, with rose gardens, to make it for the upper middle class of New Delhi. And consequently, let's go and look at the history. Why did they choose this particular spot? As I mentioned, Islam had spread across the Indian subcontinent over a period of 500 years. There were the Turks, the Afghans, and there were also the Mongols, who were descendants of Genghis Khan. They came down from Uzbekistan later. Now, this all started in around the 10th and 11th century. And the Mongols later invaded in the 15th century. So that's when this area around the Lodi Garden first became habitated. Timur, who was known as Tamerlane, who was descendant of Genghis Khan, he nominated the first Sayyid of the Sayyid dynasty, and this is Muhammad Sayyid, whose tomb you see here in the Lodi Garden. He was the third ruler of the Sayyid dynasty, and that's 1434 to 44. Then Bahul Khan Lodi, this is a whole story of conquest, who was a governor of a northern province, and he was of pure Afghan Pashtun origin. He ousted the Sayyids in 1451, declared himself the Sultan of Delhi, and his son Sikandar became the Sultan. And upon his death in 1489, his tomb was also built in this area, this mausoleum area of Old Delhi. But while Sikandar was alive, he built tombs for the people of his nobility. And that includes the Bara Gumbad, which means big dome, and the Shish Gumbad, which means glazed dome. And then finally, his son built his tomb, Sikandar Lodi's tomb. So here we have this incredible park with these tombs, and this happens to be one of the highlights on everywhere you ever read about what to see in New Delhi. They tell you must go to the Lodi Garden. Okay, so that's what we did. We were right there anyway. We just got out of the India International Center, went into the Lodi Garden, and just like the mad dogs and the Englishmen, we went out in the noonday sun. And during the noonday sun, when you would find tourists such as ourselves, you can see the Bara Gumbad, you see there's me, and that's a mosque next to the Bara Gumbad and a residence on the left. Inside you see the mosque. This is all to show you what normally you see in India, aside from the intense poverty of the people in the streets. But when you go to the landmark sites, this is why people are touring India. Around Sikandar Lodi's tomb, you see he built a garden. The whole place was garden area, but he had his own, they built in what were called battlements, a miniature fort around his tomb. And of course, we're looking for wildlife. We're always looking for wildlife, and you may not see it, but up there is a green parrot. And that's all the wildlife we saw. So of course, what am I going to do? I take pictures wherever I am of the animal life, the green parrot. And we walk along the trails and we find chipmunks, pigeons. This is the wildlife we think of the Lodi Garden. There are hardly any people either at this time of day. And what we noticed is that the garden people have built, or maybe Joseph Stein, they've constructed these areas and they have bird seed out, they have watering dishes. It seems so genteel. But then we decided to go out early in the morning. And by early in the morning, I mean in India, and this is October, it's still over 90 degrees in the afternoon. You go out between 6:30 and 8:30 in the morning. Early in the morning, the Lodi Garden is a completely different situation. at the very entrance, the first things we see, not people, we see 2 dogs. So of course, I don't have the pictures of Ralph, who had to pet every single dog in India he ever saw, but we let the dogs lead us in. And what they did is, they let us in, and all of a sudden we see all these people. People by the Baragumbad, they're congregating. And I mean lots of people. They're practicing yoga. They're meeting in large groups, congregations of groups of people, and they're having a discussion, actually. And then people genteelly walking their dogs on leash. And there are signs all over the Lodi Garden. Do not feed the dogs. So I thought, okay, the 1 or 2 dogs you see, do not feed them. What are they talking about? And here is a gardener with his dog. Looks like a regular pet dog. But you walk a little bit further, and as the cover description of the Lodi Garden, we came across congregations of dogs. But within a moment, this congregation of dogs is running across, and I'm saying, oh my God, are they going to attack somebody? What are they doing? In fact, here comes Parveen. Because over the next few days, I went out early in the morning and I started meeting the people who were, it turns out, taking care of the dogs of the Lodi Garden. And Parveen is one of them. The dog's greeting her, and here. And what these people do is they get to know the dogs. They don't trap them. They wait till they know the dogs. Then they take them to private vets, and the government pays for them. It's about 25 to 30 dogs at a time. Vimal, for instance, has a morning routine every single morning. And particularly Scruffy, Cookie is the middle dog. That's his dog, a beagle. And then Chukchi. And every morning, Vimal is out there, and they bring dog biscuits. They're not giving these dogs regular food. They're not bringing them food from their homes. They're not bringing them dog food. They're just bringing them treats, dog biscuits. And where these dogs go for their sustenance is unknown, and these people don't ask. Where they're sleeping, they don't know. I looked around. There are no shelters for these dogs. What Vimal has told me is that I asked, do people rescue the dogs? No, he has a beagle. Another person I talked to, it had a Cocker Spaniel and a Labrador. Indians, for the most part, don't rescue dogs. There's not, like here, a Marin Humane Society. There are NGOs, but people don't rescue dogs from these places. They buy a pedigree dog. And as his beagle, he said, I thought it was going to be a beagle, but it was obviously a mixture. And what Vimal did, and what I really liked about it, is he was training the dogs. Every morning he got out there, and he was teaching Scruffy, and Chutki's waiting patiently for her turn. He was teaching these dogs down, stay. He was going through the whole repertoire. It didn't cross his mind that he could take one of these dogs that he worked with every morning home, but he was training the dogs. And he was very attached, and these dogs were very attached to him. Let's meet Scruffy, because another morning I found Scruffy right outside. This is the Shish Gumbab, and remember we saw the battlement. Scruffy had staked out his territory, and one thing I didn't have video to capture is these dogs have definite sense of territory within this 100 acres. They don't cross, and they don't allow each other to cross into each other's territory. And here's Scruffy waiting for his morning. Scruffy. And there is dear Scruffy. And as you can see, Scruffy's ear is notched. What the welfare organizations do, and remember this is not the Indian government doing any of the spay and neutering. These are all NGOs. All the Indian government will do at the most is kill a dog in the past. They're not allowed to kill dogs anymore. Or trap it.